if you wouldn't mind putting who you are and the organisation in the chat. We would like to record the session. Oh, Annika's done it already. We would like to record the session. If anybody's got anything confidential or doesn't want sharing, we can edit those sections out. So just let us know what it is that you wouldn't like us to share. But we have had a number of colleagues come to us this afternoon saying they can't make this session, but they're really interested in the conversation. So that's the reason for the recording. Also in the chat during this afternoon, because there's so many of us on the call, it'd be really helpful if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, things you would like to raise. If you pop them in the chat, then that will help us sort of manage the second part of the session. Obviously you can bring it up during the second part of the session, but in advance, if there are things particularly that you think I really would like to ask these questions, then popping them in the chat would help us, and also indicating if someone's raised something that you also want to raise, if you just indicate that is also relevant to you, just that helps us too. Is there anything else I've forgotten, Annika or Joe, in terms of the introductions? No. Cool. Okay, so can I pass over to Carol and Nikki from Homestart, please?
Oh, hi there. Carol and I decided beforehand I would go first. So I work at Homestart Elmbridge. My name is Nikki. I recognise a few faces on the screen. So many people here. No pressure, Carol, for us. So yeah, I've been working at Homestart Elmbridge now for just over 2 years, and I've worked in the community in the past as well. And I thought really I just would start by letting you know, really at Homestart Elmbridge what we pride ourselves on really, but more importantly, so you guys know how best to refer to us. If I just read you the blurb really, which is on our website, if you would like to have a look afterwards, it's really user friendly, and you can get tons of information in case I miss something today. And what it says is we want to see a society in which every parent has the support they need to give their children the best possible start in life. And I just think that's just so lovely. It really summarises us. And our criteria for the support is the family needs to have a child under 5. Now we have got Carol working with us now, who does the Over 5s project. So Carol will tell you how sometimes we do work together as a team, and I have actually supported a mum recently with reapplying for DLA, but I actually did the DLA 2 years ago. So we've worked together quite closely, haven't we, Carol? And mum, we'd built up a relationship, so we are open to sort of a bit of flexibility, and if we are already working with the family, as Carol is. They need to live in the borough of Elmbridge. The family needs to have needs that we're recognising that they would benefit from a weekly volunteer or specialised support from our other services, which we'll go on to tell you a little bit more about. And then most importantly, the family has given consent for the referral. So i.e. if any of you guys want to refer, that the family are aware of that and they have given consent. And then what would happen next is, so say for instance, you guys have had a look on the internet, and obviously we can tell you a little bit more about our organisation, but you've had a look on the internet and you think, actually, I really feel that this family could benefit from a volunteer. You would complete a referral. That referral would come through to us, and somebody called a family support coordinator would contact you just to discuss the family in a little bit more detail if they felt there was something that sounded like it was just slightly more complex, or if you felt there was something that actually you didn't want to put this on the form, you wanted to go into more detail, you would have a chat, and then the family coordinator would contact mum, arrange to go and do a home visit. In COVID times, this all happened on the phone, but we're now back home visiting, thankfully. They would go round and have a chat with mum on the sofa, very chilled, and just listen to what mum's needs are. Maybe the health visitor, for example, might have identified that mum seems quite isolated. And the family support coordinator would be aware of that, but would also sort of really listen to mum and find out what mum's saying that her needs are. Then would come back and have a chat with the team. And we have team meetings where we call them matching meetings. And we've got a list of volunteers on the board that aren't active. And that means that they don't currently have a family they're supporting. And the team will have a chat and discuss mum's needs, what the referrer has suggested as well, and then look for the best possible volunteer for that family. Then they'll have a chat with the volunteer and discuss the family just briefly, but just, is this something that interests you? Say, for instance, it might be a child with additional needs, or it might be twins in the family, and have a chat with the volunteer. And then we arrange a matching meeting where the volunteer will go with the family support coordinator to mum's house, to the family home. And again, very casual, cup of tea. We all just have a light-hearted conversation. And then when the family coordinator comes back to the office, they'll have a chat with mum, maybe the next day, dad, whoever we're trying to match up with a volunteer, and also have a chat with the volunteer to make sure both parties are quite happy and that actually this is a good match and that volunteer can go on and support the family. Now, generally, it's never an issue. We've always found that pretty much, I would say probably about, 95% of the matches work on that first visit. But it doesn't stop there. If the volunteer did their first visit, for instance, and thought, no, this isn't for me, this doesn't suit me, for various reasons, again, it can just be done in a very subtle and very discreet way. They can have a chat with their family support coordinator, who then will have a chat with mum and will, it's not really the right word to use, will maybe not make up an excuse, so to speak. We'll just say, actually, the volunteers actually has decided that she doesn't have the time, or she has got a new something has come up that actually she can't necessarily offer support on this day. So actually no one is offended. The volunteer is not offended, and nor is mum. And then we can go back in with a second match. That's happened a few times, but it doesn't happen very often. And then from then on, our volunteer, who's been trained for 40 hours, they do 40 hours of extensive training, so they'll cover safeguarding, and they'll cover some basic first aid. They cover about being confidential. They would do 40 hours of training. They will then go and visit the family on the planned day for 2 hours a week, on the same time and the same day each week, which is what we found has really worked really nicely for both sides. That volunteer then will have regular supervision, will be having regular contact with the family support coordinator, and we always advise that they do not share their own personal phone numbers. Everything goes through the family support coordinator. So say, for instance, maybe little one was poorly and mum wanted to cancel, it would come via our office, and then we would contact our volunteers, and vice versa. We really try to make sure that the volunteers are protected in that way. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else on that side. Really, what mainly our volunteers are used for is for helping mums with isolation, so being there for mum, being company for mum. So we very much look at, actually, do we think these two adults have got something in common? We also have volunteers that will support mums with getting out and about. So say, for instance, they're isolated, they don't drive. We have got volunteers that specialise in helping families learn to budget and learn to manage money. The list goes on, really. It's as we start working with our volunteers, we really start working out what their strengths are and what families they really enjoy working with. And that makes it quite good for the family support coordinators to really identify where the needs meet best. So that's our family support coordinators. Then we
Nikki, can I interrupt? So do your volunteers get supported for challenging behaviour? Just thinking about the sort of the topic here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can we just think about what strategies they might have in their armoury?
I think what probably for that case, what would happen is if the volunteers started recognising that the family were having some issues, so they had a child that was really displaying some challenging behaviour, they would come back to the family support coordinator almost immediately, and then the family support coordinator would look at how to support the family more than what the volunteer would. So it would actually be passed back to us, and then what would happen is the coordinator would either decide whether it was something that was going to go via Carol, via myself, or an outside agency. But very much the volunteers are encouraged to feed back to us anything. So if there was sleep deprivation, if there was some, signs of some really challenging behaviour, then definitely the volunteers would come back to us. We do have some volunteers that actually have come from a background of working with children with additional needs, and they do ask to go into families and support families that are struggling.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. Is it worth moving on to talk about, Carol, if you want to pick up then in terms of the family coordinators and the strategies that they use?
That's right, yeah. So as Nikki said, and I think one of the opportunities that are available to the families are Nikki's services, where she can go in and really help with the challenging behaviour, and also applying to other organisations like the for disability living allowance, really helpful there. And if I go on then to talk about the Over Fives project, so we do have this Over Fives project, and quite a lot of the parents that join my project have come through the Home Start system, and we also get referrals. So what we offer, because a large majority of these families that come to my project have children with challenging behaviour, so we have two things that we can offer. One is a parent support cafe, and here we offer a nurturing environment. It's we make it very accessible, and we're on one of the estates in Walton, St John's Estate, so it's on the doorstep. It's set up so parents can drop off their children and come to the cafe, and there we see a lot of things happening. It's great, because the most important thing, I think, is the mutual support that parents can give each other, because quite often with parents with children with challenged behaviour can become really isolated, and the mutual support parents give each other is invaluable. I also have some volunteers at the cafe, and again their main role is really listening, because a lot of these parents also feel quite unheard, or they've dealt with a lot of different agencies, including schools, and they need to tell their story sometimes. It's also an opportunity to build up confidence, and maybe also signpost where necessary. So one of the things we signpost to, of course, is the course that we run ourselves, which is the Challenging Behaviour course. So this may come from the Home Start route to refer to this course, because it's a course for parents with children over 5 and who exhibit challenging behaviour. So we get referrals from the family centre, and I can see some of my referees here, which is lovely to see, and also from homeschool link workers. We've got really good links in with our homeschool homeschool link workers in the area. So that's a really valuable source of referrals for us, and hopefully for them as well. So it's a 10-week course, and I think this is really quite crucial, because all the evidence shows that we need that length of a course to really implement some change for families, and that's what the course is about. Some of you may have heard of the course. It was originally devised in 2011 when SPES, some of you may remember SPES, Surrey Parenting and Education Support, which has long since flown and been replaced by Surrey in their wisdom for other services, but one great one, children's centres, that again have disappeared along the way, but we all know that story. But this course was very well taken up with children's centres, and I know a lot of health visitors. One of the people devising this course was a health visitor, and it was a collaboration with CAMS, with Surrey Care Trust were involved, the Diocese of Guildford were involved, and it's a course that is based on social learning, and it really pays an emphasis on the mutual support that parents can get from each other, and really rebuilding their confidence, and also rebuilding bonds with their challenging children, because sometimes what we find is that that's gone by the wayside, and when we ask parents what do they want from the course, quite often that comes out, I want to regain that bond with my child, because this child is quite difficult to love sometimes. And that's what we work on, and we work on it through two ways. One is through themes on the course that I'm sure some of you will find familiar. We talk about special time, looking out for the good stuff, cycles of behaviour, breaking the negative attention trap, healthy positive thinking, ditching the guilt, the danger of labelling, and also a bit about the theory of change in a really accessible, easy way, so that they can see the little progress step by step that builds and builds and builds to big changes. Then the strategies that we talk about and that we try and equip their toolbox full of strategies. We talk about a nice reward system called the home point system. We talk about closing down negative attention, giving choices and consequences, a lot about building self-esteem. And of course, for parents, realizing that they need to build and pay attention to their own self-esteem to help their children. We look at expressing feelings, and only this morning we were talking, some parents find that really difficult, and some of their children are not verbal, and their behaviours they're showing their frustration sometimes, and we encourage parents to look underneath the behaviours to really address what need is being exhibited here. So that's a bit about the course, and we get good feedback. Some of the feedback, we monitor it weekly, but we have comments like, I know it's difficult to deal with and talk about emotions, but very helpful. Working on ways to understand and listen to child's feelings using phrases that acknowledge and not suppress. And the realization that behaviours can be driven by the child's need. And also about realizing, in that cycle of behaviour that they've maybe got into bad habits themselves, and sort of breaking those bad habits and looking out to rebuild relationships with their children. So hopefully we send them away, and we do a pre and post parental skills questionnaire that does measure some really nice shifts for the parents. But they're going away feeling better about themselves, with a supportive group around them of other parents, and also some strategies that they can draw on to help with their children's challenging behaviour. So that's what it's all about. We don't leave them there. We offer them the cafe so they can continue with that mutual support. We might bring Nikki in if there's a sleep issue or a DLA that needs completing. And we've also got a Home Start counsellor that we can refer to too. So it's sort of a whole package of care on quite a small project. It's just those are the basic elements. Of course, I do a lot of one-to-one connecting with parents as well. I can offer food bank vouchers, other vouchers from Home Start, refer to Danielle. But really, the challenging behaviour course, I think, is the one that you in this forum will probably be most interested in. And you may have come across it, but the course is based on a book by David Pentecost, and it's called Parenting the ADD Child. But he acknowledges in the introduction that it applies to ADHD, ASD and other challenging behaviour, because quite a lot of the parents we get might be pre-diagnosis or no diagnosis at all, or just finding their way still. But it offers reassurance for parents that, in fact, I've got a nice quote about right in week 1 when we ask for feedback. Not only they say, oh, it's great to feel not alone, but this one really struck a chord with me. And after just like week 1, one parent said, what did she find most important? And her quote said that we will find a way. And that's nice to hear. But that positivity when sometimes they've come to us with very little positivity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Carol. Oh, sorry, I'm here on myself. Can I pass over then to Leanne, just to talk about the helpline and the work that's happening in terms of some of the phone numbers that parents can call?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Sue. So hi everyone, my name's Leanne. I work for the Study Positive Parenting Service. So I joined the team on the 29th of March this year. Previous background, I've worked for various services within Barnardo's. And obviously, I'm just going to follow on a little bit what Carol was talking about there around children with ADHD and that waiting diagnosis. And obviously, you know, when they've had a diagnosis. So, as I say, Surrey Positive Parenting Service have worked alongside the NHS for the last 5 years. So they've delivered the Nurture programme and the Parent Factor. So the Nurture programme is for parents where they're awaiting diagnosis, if they're under a clinician with CAMS for the children. And the Parent Factor course is the course that's delivered for children who've got a diagnosis. That's for parents where the child's got a diagnosis. And both of those are 8-week programmes that have obviously been delivered via Zoom for the last 18 months during the pandemic, and they're now going back out face to face. So they've been sort of a core team for the last 5 years. And then last year, there was a bid put forward. So for the next 10 years, in terms of our contract, we've developed the service further. So part of that is the out-of-hours helpline. We've also got a schools awareness team that go into schools to raise awareness around children who've got ADHD and how to support schools and with strategies and interventions and to raise awareness. We've also got an under 6 teams that's just been mobilised, so they work with families with children 6 and under. We also have part of the contract and another team that work with the children directly in school. And then there's myself, that's the out-of-hours ADHD Parenting Helpline, which I'm going to go into now. So as I say, we were sort of a subcontractor to the NHS and Surrey and Borders Partnership, but we are actually now an equal partner alongside Learning Space and the National Autistic Society and some of the other organisations within the new sort of contract that's moving forward around emotional wellbeing. So in terms of our ADHD helpline, so as I started back at the end of March, we actually went live on the 24th of June this year. So we've been working alongside the NHS design team, and what they've put together for us is, I would say it's sort of like a bespoke unit. So basically what we've been able to do with Barnardo's and Surrey and Borders Partnership is to record directly onto System 1. So basically what happens is when a call comes in from a parent, so we work from 5 p.m. till 11 p.m. So that's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I'm just going to bring up some of the information I've got on my presentation here. So the out-of-hours ADHD Parenting Helpline is to provide advice and guidance for parents and carers. So as I say, as I've said, we've got a child with a diagnosis of ADHD or in the process of waiting for assessment. Sort of from the last 4 months when we've gone live, the number has been given out to parents on a needs to know basis. That's been given out from clinicians within CAMS when they've been seen within the service. And as I say, it operates 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and we are operating from 5 to 11 p.m. Sort of conversations with parents last year, what came about was, as we know, when the end of the school day and children go home, they've tried to keep a lid on it all day in school, and school aren't seeing the same behaviours. And as we know, for a diagnosis, we need observations for 6 months into environments. And parents have said when the children are coming home, their safe place, their, you know, safe base, that's when they're getting the really challenging behaviour, when the children are coming home. So what was stated last year, that parents felt that they weren't supported out of those hours. So that was the reason why this helpline was set up, just to give them, you know, a number to call, that they're able to, like Carol and Nikki talked about, it's that reassurance that somebody's there that they're able to talk to. And especially in terms of one of the services I worked through on the pandemic, on the See Hear Respond, what we saw was, like you said, parents isolated, the challenging behaviour, how to manage that, you know, feeling very alone, you know, people judging your parenting, when actually we know with neurodiverse children, actually it's to do with brain development. And there's other things going on for these children that aren't necessarily just environmental, but it could be genetic as well. You know, and if you haven't got that diagnosis, that's some of the things that parents are lacking in terms of how they feel around their own parenting and their self-esteem. This was one of the things why the ADHD Parenting Helpline was set up in terms of that out of hours. So what happens is a parent will call the number, which I'm going to give out at the end when we've had a chat, and they will then be given like a series of options. So within there is the emergency duty team. We also work alongside the National Autistic Society, so they are one of the options as well. So if their child is presenting with certain behaviours that is set out in the automated message, they can speak to somebody from the National Autistic Society, or if it's the child who's got a diagnosis of ADHD or are currently awaiting assessment or undergoing assessment, they can get through to myself or one of the other two ladies on the helpline. So that's how sort of the process works in terms of how to call in. I'm just gonna. So in terms of the service user journey, as I say, throughout the day they can call obviously CAMS themselves, but from 5 till 11 they can call into us, and obviously just for advice and guidance. In terms of the calls that we've received so far, we tend to find that actually the child's already had the meltdown. So it's usually after a situation has happened, or it could be in that process, but usually the calls that we've had so far are usually the child has had a meltdown, there's been an incident, and then the parent has called for advice just to get some reassurance, some support. So in terms of how a call would look in terms of sort of that situation, once I've sort of spoke to the parent, we've seen where things are for them. Firstly, obviously safeguarding the child and asking where the child is, and if we feel that there's a safeguarding issue, we feel that the child is going to harm themselves or somebody else, obviously we would, follow our safeguarding policies and procedures in terms of that. Do we need to phone 999? Do we need to phone for an ambulance? But what we've found is it's mostly, like as we've said, it's a parents, it's just that reassurance. They're just going through a really difficult time. We know that on an evening for routines, especially for children who've got a diagnosis of ADHD, who are neurodiverse, trying to explain to a child, right, have your tea, do this, get that, get ready, that isn't going to work for that child. And it's sometimes just explaining that to parents that needs to be broken down in terms of the routines and those small steps. That's some of the work that we do. And a lot of it is around routines. But what we'll do is we will talk about the trigger. So we'll talk about the importance of getting in there early. Have they observed what actually was going on for the child? Did they see a clenched jaw? Did they see any eyeballing? Did they see any, clenched fists? Were they able to see that the child was then going to be escalated to have that meltdown? So thinking about, firstly for the parent, we would talk about, were they feeling calm? And I always call it fueling the fire. So thinking about when the child's having a meltdown, we talk about in sort of language and jargon that the parents would understand is about that thinking and reasoning, because sometimes when you try and put demands on a child when they're having a meltdown, they're just not in that thinking and reasoning part of the brain. So it's about not putting too much expectation on them, not placing demands on them. So when we talk to the parent about what's happened before that phone call, we'll talk about potentially what may happen next, what would happen again, what would we do next. So we talk about the thought and the feeling, the behaviour. The behaviour is what they've seen, so we would take that back and try and unpick that with the parent. So again, we give them some of the strategies from the Family Links Nurture programme. So a little bit about what Carol talked about in terms of your programme, Carol. We talk about choice and consequences. We talk about I statements. Got a few of them here. We talk about obviously, we talk about being a good role model and how to handle those emotions and the anger. And obviously, for the parents, is they have to model how they also deal with their emotions. And some of the feedback we've got from the parents is actually, I am trying to deal with it better, and they're trying to unpick it themselves. And when we talk about that thought, feeling and behaviour, it's actually developing their emotional intelligence as well as the child's. But we know for neurodiverse children, that's more difficult than we would say for a neurotypical child who's obviously having some of those challenges at the moment. So once we've unpicked a little bit of like the triggers and things with the parent, and we've safeguarded the child, we'll talk about what the next steps would be for that evening. So what is going to be, say for the next half hour, what is the plan for that evening? What are they plan to do with the child, for themselves? And then we'll talk about, obviously we've talked about what would, if this happened again, how would you manage that situation? And then what we've done is sometimes we've emailed leaflets over like top tips. So we've got tips for working with teenagers, obviously around validating their feelings, not placing too much expectations on them. We talk about emotion and coaching, obviously acknowledging the feeling and actually saying it is okay that you feel this way. And I think that's hard for a parent sometimes because they've flooded with their own adrenaline and cortisol, how they're thinking about things, but they've also got to validate how their child's feeling and what life's like for them. And I think for some parents that can be really difficult of getting down to their child's level. So again, it's just talking about some of that. Just thinking another couple of points here. Things I've used in the past in terms of my own, when I used to work in schools, is around distraction. So again, if you can just get in early and see some of those triggers, sometimes it's made, like I used to do in school, was give the child a job to do. So I would, like we always said in the school, we would give the child a book and say, right, could you go and give this to, you know, Mr. Such and Such. And again, I think we can do that with, when I've done it with early years children, and we do it with toddlers around distraction before the behaviour, that can be a bit more difficult, I think, for teenagers. So again, it's just trying to see, I think, what works for the age and stage and development of the child, you know. And as Carol talked about, I think on the end of the family nurture programme, it's having that toolbox. Because I always say to parents, we're going to talk about this today, but actually next week it might not work. And if you phone in again and we've got another scenario or situation, could we try something different? And it always is, it's having that tools in your box, but being able to try different things. So that's kind of things we talk about as well in the Family Links Nurture programme. So I've talked about calming down, having a safe space, but I always say to parents as well, especially teenagers, have you ever had a debrief of a situation you've had? You know, with somebody, being in the car with a teenager. I know personally with my own child is I'd probably get his whole life story in an hour in the car that I haven't had for 6 months, you know. And it's just talking to parents around that and giving them strategies that maybe they hadn't thought about previously. But as I say, it just sort of depends on what would work for one child. And I always talk about the environment. So thinking about some of the triggers with some of the children, has it been busy? Has there been a sensory overload? Has the television been on? Has been a particular trigger that's been for that child that evening? And you might have just actually been, they've heard the word no that they don't like, but actually acknowledging why they don't like the word no, and just, you know, relating it to what the situation was, what they'd asked for and why you'd said no. Actually, I know you wanted the blue cup and not the orange cup, but what would we do? You know, and trying to explain why. Because sometimes when we give a child who's neurodiverse an explanation, it's maybe not enough. You just need to break it down a little bit. So that's some of the things that we do talk about in some of the calls with the parents. But it's also by the end of the call ensuring that the child's safeguarded. Mum's usually a lot calmer. And in terms of some of the feedback, again, it is just that reassurance that somebody's on the end of the phone. And some of the obviously difficulties in terms of it being a helpline, we can't read body language. So we don't see the facial cues, but we've really got to think about our tone on the helpline, the tenacity, the words that they're using, the meaning of the words that they're saying, you know, because we can't see the body language. That's some of the skills that I've had to learn as being a helpline advisor as well as the team. So again, it's just recognising that with the parents and just where they're at that time, really, and what life's like for them at that point in time when things are really difficult. The child's kept a lid on it all day. They've come home. And as we say, they're the volcano that's exploded, and mum thinks it's her fault when actually trying to explain that it's actually not. And as Carol said, it is just somebody saying there's just somebody there to talk to, and it can just be that reassurance. And actually, they can come up with a lot of their own strategies. And, you know, when we think about from a strengths-based, I always say, like, what's gone well? Think about it, you know, a good and a bad day. What went well on that good day, right? How could we make that a little bit better the next time? So it's them thinking about their own strategies that we're here as a helpline, but we don't want them to become independent on it. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not being too, you know, reliant on that they have got their own strategies and they have got through the day. So that's just some of the things that we would talk about on the helpline and things with the families. And also if we feel that if there's been an issue with medication or there's been, say, potentially 3 calls in a week, we would always say to go back to the clinician, to give CAMS a ring the next morning, speak to the clinician, to always follow up on the next appointment things were and where they were within their assessment process at that time.
Great, thank you, Leanne. You said you were going to share the number. Do you want to pop it in the chat? Is that all right? You're on mute.
So when you give the number out, there'll be different options. There's the EDT team, there's NAS, so it's 0300 222 5755, and I think we're option 3. We should be option 3.
Do you want to say it again?
Yeah, so it's 0300 222 5755. And as I say, there'll be different options that you get, and I think we're option 3 or 4. I think we'd moved, but you'll get NAS. There's NAS on there, National Autistic Society. There's an automated message, and it'll say, you know, is your child presenting with these behaviours? Do you need to speak to somebody in relation to ADHD? And then they'll come through to us, and then we'll take the call. And I'd say average at the moment, an average call is probably about 40 minutes. And then what we would do is obviously end the call, and then we record on our dashboard that the design team from the NHS have put together for us, which has been amazing.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Nikki, for your input also. We've got about, or just under 15 minutes. So if people, yes, want to put, lovely, I love Annie, you've got your hand up already. If people want to put questions in the chat or put your hands up, we'll come and share. And yes, don't feel that it has to just be to the three guys that have spoken. You know, if you and your team have got some response also, because I appreciate we've got home starts and family centres and NHS colleagues from all over. So yeah, please chip in. Annie, go.
Yeah, no, I don't know whether I just fell asleep at one point, but I just wanted to clarify the helpline is it can be pre-diagnosis as well.
It is, yes, Annie. It's pre-diagnosis and diagnosis. It is. Because obviously in terms of the sort of positive parenting, we do see families that are pre-diagnosis, which is they attend the nurture programme, then diagnosis is the parent factor.
Right.
So it's pre and post.
Okay, and but the helpline as well is specifically.
It is, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? There was a question in the chat about the area for the helpline.
Yeah,
and
so it's
of course,
Surrey and Borders. Yeah, we always check out where the GP is. Obviously, because the GP could be within the borders, but they live outside. But we would still obviously offer support to that family.
Lovely. Sophie's put a question in the chat about waiting times following referral, but I think this probably, could we broaden the question out specifically about any of the groups? So either the Home Start group or Leanne, any of your groups, in terms of how that's looking at the minute in terms of capacity.
In terms of the family links and the parent factor, I know that we're oversubscribed. A lot of referrals do come from CAMS. I did speak to a mum, I think 2 weeks ago, who she's due to start a parenting group in January, but I know the next cohort are full, and January also. So, but in terms of the time for that, I'd have to get back to you with that. So.
Okay, and maybe I can say with our course, we run our 10-week course once a term. So I'm already starting a waiting list for January. What I do emphasise with the referrers that we need to work together for the parent to make the commitment, because quite often a parent say, oh yes, you know, that sounds great, I'll come, and then that doesn't come. So we try and remove all the barriers. We can pay for taxis to get to the course. And by collaborating with the referrer and building up a relationship with the parent before they actually start the course is really important to ensure that, you know, the places we've given are taken up. So that's quite an important part of the process, is the work done pre-course.
Thank you. And I know we've got colleagues from other Home Starts also on the call. Does anybody from any of the other Home Starts want to talk about anything that they've got? No. Okay.
Hi, I'm Debs from Home Start Spelthorne, and we're working with one of the local family centres to deliver the parenting puzzle, which I believe is very similar to the nurture programme. So we're partnering with them to deliver that, which will be in the new year.
Lovely, thank you. Has anybody got any specific questions about a family that you've worked with, or particular things that feel like important to raise in terms of things that have come up for you that you're not sure how to handle a situation, or wanting to seek some clarification from the teams on the call?
Hello, may I talk?
Hi. Yes, please do.
Okay, this is Arianna. I'm one of the youth workers from Surrey County Council, and I'm in the southwest area, so Guildford, Waverley. And we've talked about children 5 years old, less than 5, and families, but I work with teenagers. We're talking about 14, 15, 16 years old, and mainly with them, and sometimes with parents if they want to engage. So my question is, when we have to deal with challenging behavior, not in the youth center, but generally teenagers that have these challenging behaviors at home, and they don't want to be referred or signposted to our targeted youth support teams, which are part of Surrey County Council, where should we signpost them? Because we work with young people along with them, along their path of discovery, and we try to support them and to help them. But there are sometimes cases where we have to signpost and refer them to another service. But some of the young people absolutely don't want to be referred with their family to the target youth support, which are all social workers or youth support practitioners. Is there another service?
That's a good question. Has anybody got any view? I'm sort of looking at Annie because she's in your area, but has anybody got any thoughts? I'm just thinking through, Joe, if we've got any charities that we think would be good. I was thinking about Surrey Care Trust might be a good place for them, but Annie, go for it if you've got a thought.
Yeah, I don't know that I've got any answers or solutions. I'd accept to say that, acknowledge that it is a massive issue, and it's also a massive issue with the young people who have those additional needs. So obviously at Gosden House we have students who have learning and additional needs, and I think that it's that combination of the sort of overlap between the neurodiversity as well as sort of like that low level mental health, anxiety, those sort of things that kind of often, trigger these kind of responses. I was just about to put in the chat actually that a few years ago we had somebody called Sarah Fisher come in, who runs Connective Parenting, and that is the NVR approach for anybody who's heard of nonviolent resistance. And it's an area that I think really needs promoting in the area, because in this locality, because I think that we've been talking about challenging behaviour, but actually if you drill down and say what is challenging behaviour, what behaviour challenges parents, I mean, in our experience, it's when the kids fight back. It is actually the child on parent violence that is becoming so common. Maybe it's always been there, but it's certainly been talked about more. And NVR is seen as something which can sometimes help with that. But it's quite an involved process, and I know that there is a little bit of that going on through CAMS, through Wendy Smith. I was having a conversation with her yesterday to try and find out a bit more, but I think in general there's a big need for training in that area, and it is a more trauma-informed kind of approach rather than being sort of fully behavioural. It's actually understanding like the need behind the behaviour, and I think that's really critical for those young people. And obviously the context in which they're living, the contextual safeguarding questions. So I don't know, it's not a solution, but I do definitely think it's a problem, and I think it's an area that we're not very good at. Many of our students have been referred to family support programs or targeted youth support ad nauseum. The families are fed up with it. They're saying, no, I don't want another assessment. I don't want another worker. It makes no difference. So we've got to be a bit more imaginative, I think, and a bit more creative about how we look at what is underlying these behaviours.
Yeah, that's the problem, because I had young people come from Gosden House, so I know very well. And I end up seeing these young people because I've built a relationship with them only when the youth centre is open, so once a week.
Yeah.
And I can't do more, honestly, unfortunately, in my position. So that's why I'm always trying to understand if there are other agencies, other services, other charities where I can, run something in partnership with.
Thank you.
You mentioned Surrey Care Trust, but
I was going to bring Sian in because she's from Surrey Care Trust. So let me bring Sian in.
Hi everybody. Yeah, I was just going to say that obviously our mentoring program is really good for young people aged 11 to 18. But it is early help. Don't forget, they are level 2. Okay, so I always make a point of saying that if you've got young people who have got issues with drugs and things like that, then obviously you are better off going to Catch 22. But if you're talking about emotional support and anxiety, if you're talking about where they are from quite a dysfunctional family, so there's not any of that support within the home, young carers, then obviously please refer to us, okay? Because we now have the 2 programs as well. So we have the early help level 2, but we also have the CAMS contract. So we are now working with children who have been diagnosed with ASD, and that is going very well. So again, obviously, just to be aware of that yes, we will always, and I always say, if you're unsure, the best thing to do is just pick up the phone. Literally give us a call. I've got quite a big, large team now of coordinators, and any of them are happy to have that conversation with you, and myself included, to say whether or not you think that referral is suitable before you go through all that paperwork. All right.
Thank you, Sian. Annie. Is that a new hand or an old hand, Annie? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
So at one time, Surrey Care Trust weren't really open to learning and additional needs, particularly special school. It was kind of on the referral form that you didn't, but interesting to hear that there is now the contract and the ASD connections there. That's really useful to hear.
Yeah. Annie, if I can just say, what we say is that I think what it is, because our mentoring is in the community and they go out and they meet in a cafe, if you've got a child with, say, a speech and language difficulty, then it's very difficult for them to actually sit and actually talk with all the noise level around as well within a cafe. So you've got to take all those things into consideration. And so, yeah, so it's not a case of it's a definite no. With the CAMS contract, with the early help contract, slightly different because that's only a level 2. But with the CAMS contract, if they've got a diagnosis, it depends on where they are. It's such a wide spectrum, isn't it? It's huge, you know? So I can't say it's it's one or the other. And that's why those conversations are really the best way. Okay.
Thank you, Sian. Thank you, Annie, for the question. Jo?
I was just going to say that Karen in the chat has put something about a course called Who's in Charge, and I was just going to ask a little bit more about it because I hadn't heard of it before. If Karen's willing to come on and speak.
Yeah, it's you can find it on the internet. It's a course that some family centres are delivering, and I've actually got a family who's doing it at the moment. And she has a child on the autistic spectrum and is finding it helpful. And I think Annie said to me that it sounds similar to the course that she was talking about earlier. So that's why I mentioned it. So it's a 9-week course, but my colleague and I are training to deliver it from November. So we're going to do the training and then be available to deliver it, I guess, mainly in Waverley.
Lovely, thank you. That sounds really positive, and it would be helpful, actually, I think, if there are any other links or courses or things that people have found helpful, particularly around challenging behaviour, then please do pop it in the chat or share it afterwards, because if we can create a sort of a list of things that colleagues have found helpful, then I think that sharing of information is always good. Carol?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the Family Links offer the Talking Teens programme, which is 4 weeks that I've delivered in the past. And when I was with Family Matters, we'd deliver that for a group of parents who all had teenagers with ASD. So again, having that mutual experience made that course that's written for, generically, it actually made it a really helpful course for those parents. So doing something like that is an option if there's not a tailor-made course. And in fact, I found that worked very well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's helpful also for us to think about more generally, isn't it, in terms of if we're creating spaces for parents with similar experiences to come together, then that sort of feels really relevant.
Okay. Can I just jump in a minute and just say as well, we're also at the moment, we're putting some courses, well, they're just one-off evening sessions for parents of children aged 5 to 11 with children who've got ASD diagnosis or trying to get a diagnosis. And the whole idea, they're just one-off sessions, but the whole idea behind them is that we actually try and get those parents to start supporting each other. So again, if you've got any parents of that age 6 to 11, Leanne, I've put in the chat saying, can we have a chat, please? It'd be really worthwhile us having a discussion.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
And Sian, are you thinking that are they going to be in the Northwest, or are they all over those?
So at the moment, we're starting in Woking and in Elmbridge, just because that's two areas that we have areas that we can actually do it. And then hopefully the next one we'll do will be Spelthorne, because we feel that there's quite a need within Spelthorne, and then we're planning on hopefully then going across the east. So it's all still very much in its early stages, and we're trying to actually see how it goes. Do you see? It's one of those, let's try out 2 boroughs. If it works well, we'll move into another one. And if it works well, we'll keep going with it. All right.
Sian, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I work at Elmbridge Family Centre, and just how do we refer to you then for that? Because I've got quite a few parents that have need that support.
Sophie, I think, is going to get in touch.
Oh, cool. Okay. I have Sophie's contact details.
Yeah, so we've literally only put the materials together yesterday, so this is right off the press. All right.
Perfect.
And the flyer is going out literally by the end of this week. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Thanks.
Lovely. There's a couple of things going in the chat. Anyone know of resources in Northwest? So Surrey Heath. And then and if there are things in Surrey Heath, I don't know if colleagues from that area are on the call, but we can definitely have a think about what resources are available for you, Sophie. And then Karen saying the delivering parenting workshops and talking teams. Brill. Okay, so I'm conscious of time. If there are other questions, please do feel free to drop them in the chat, or if you want to make connections. I mean, that's part of this session, is really just to be aware of things that are going on and people to share. And if there isn't anything else people want to raise in terms of in the forum, then we will draw the session to the close and say thank you very much for coming. I think Annika has got a quick feedback link. You're going to put it in the chat, Annika? Yes, lovely. And we're particularly interested in, the what next, and I've heard quite a few things in terms of this particular space which we may want to just take away, think about. I love the idea of this non-violence resistance. Thank you, Annie, for that. I think that's really helpful. And basing it on that trauma informed. I love the idea of the workshops being specifically for groups of parents with similar interests or similar needs for their children. I think that's really helpful. Sharing of the resources is also really good. So there's the feedback form. I have duly remembered, because I tend not to remember these things, to say that. But thank you very much. Thank you to Carol, to Nikki and to Leanne for sharing this afternoon, and thank you all for your time.